Hello again, this is Preheat. Welcome back to another World of Warcraft video. Today we're going to be covering Sunfury Arcane, and this is a powerhouse of a hero talent build that definitely has a lot more going on than Spellslinger, but it's looking really fun and really strong, and it's definitely something you need to learn if you want to play Arcane, because if this ends up being what we end up playing, and you don't know how to play it, you're definitely going to not be able to just pick it right up like you would with Spellslinger. It definitely has a lot more going on. So whenever you log into the game, this is what your character is going to look like. You're going to have these nice little orbs. It is a flavor that's specific to Sunfury. You have these orbs. These are consumed by our bird, Arlo, our phoenix, who is going to cast exceptional spells with them. So it looks really cool. And this build is actually really interesting because it has some talents that kind of incentivize a different way to play. So for Spellslinger, we are concerned with mainly just double dipping Nether Precision. That's like our main goal, right? But as Sunfury, we aren't as concerned with double dipping Nether Precision all the time. We do it whenever it lines up with other things, whenever it's convenient. But unless we have like a 4-piece proc, or we're using like our Glorious Incandescence, which we'll explain just a little bit, we're not really doing the double dipping thing. So as Sunfury, what you care about are the orbs, but specifically you want to get the orbs for Burden of Power. So Burden of Power is a buff that basically works like Nether Precision. This is going to make 30% more damage on your next blast or barrage, but it actually works just like Nether Precision, where we can queue the blast into barrage and we can get the double value there. And whenever we do that, we also get 4 charges back because of Glorious Incandescence. The only time you'll ever see this buff, though, is if you press a barrage with Burden and you don't blast into it. Okay, so it is a buff that you need to be aware of, but it's not always going to be visible to you. Just know that if you have Burden of Power, you're casting Blast in the Barrage in most cases, and then you're just going to keep your 4 charges. So the spheres themselves are only generated by 2 spells. That's going to be Arcane Blast and Arcane Barrage. So every other spell in the toolkit here, unless it somehow amps the damage of Blast and Barrage, is at a disadvantage because we want to just cast as many Blasts and Barrages as possible. Right, so that basically the idea here is just acquire Burden, spend Burden well, double dip on it as much as possible, while also trying to spend missiles for Nether Precision and double dipping where appropriate there too. This is where things get complicated because we can stack both at the same time, right? But other talents here, we have Memory of Alar. So this is going to basically give us this window at the end of our cooldown, our Arcane Surge, where all of our barrages are going to give us clear casting, and they're also going to generate 4 charges. So basically, we're going to be machine gunning barrages, using missiles for Nether Precision, and doing more barrages. But the goal here is, since this generates clear casts guaranteed, the goal here is to enter with Nether Precision up and no clear casts, and to exit with our arms filled with clear casting, right? So we need to make sure that we can hold all those clear casts so that we can exit with a whole bunch. So spending the missiles before you go into this is usually pretty good because it means that we can generate more clear casts during it and then exit with a bunch of clear casts ready to go. And then also we have a choice note here. So this is going to be Savor the Moment, which just gives us more cooldown time. This is better in single target, but then we also have this one, Sunfury Execution. This is just going to give us more execute damage. This talent's really, really good if there's ever more than one target. It's honestly not even that far behind in single target. But in AoE, this thing is a powerhouse. Make sure you always have this in AoE, because in AoE, we'll be casting a lot more barrages, and the build will actually change a little bit. But here are the talents for single target. So notice I have Bobble here instead of Cleave, right? Obviously swap those two if you are doing more than one target. And I do have 2 points into Prodigious Savant. So that's just because we kind of just stick at 4 charges the whole time. So having a high voltage generate more charges, having more orbs to generate charges, that's only going to be useful if there are additional targets to cleave. So like if I'm cleaving more enemies, I might go into Barrage. If I'm cleaving even more enemies, I'll probably do high voltage. With even more, I'll probably grab the second charge of orb because I'll be using orb more. Obviously, make sure that you swap this over for cleave as well. All right, so I'm going to use the term normal rotation a lot, so I feel like I should explain that before I show the opener. So basically, the normal rotation is if you have below 4 Spellfire Spheres, then you're always just going to try to get Nether Precision and do a couple blasts, okay? So that just makes the blast always consume Nether Precision. And if you're at 4, you're just going to cast Arcane Blast. Regardless of missiles being up, right? You just want to cast Arcane Blast. And at 5, you want to use missiles into Blast, Blast, Barrage. And that's going to make it so we double dip on the Burden of Power and the last stack of Nether Precision. That's the basic idea there. But obviously, Intuition procs kind of mix things up. Like if you get your 4-piece proc, which is Intuition, you want to queue a Barrage after that blast. And bonus points if you can get it with the Nether Precision double queuing. But you wouldn't do that if you have like Burden of Power up, right? So basically, it's like if you're at 4... you're still allowed to use Intuition after your blast, but if you are at 5, it is no longer allowed. Okay, anything below 5 is fine to use Intuition. And at 4, you generally want to always Arcane Blast. Okay, so on the opener, we use Mirror Image. We have our barrier up. We Evocation. After this Evocation finishes, we're going to cast Missiles, and we're going to clip it. We always clip our missiles on the GCD. Just pretend like it's a GCD instead of a channel. And then we're going to cast our Arcane Surge here into Touch of the Magi without a Barrage. We're not barraging into this touch because we don't have 4 charges. So we're just going to cast Arcane Surge here into Touch of the Magi. And then we're going to immediately do 2 blasts. So 1, 2 here. And by the way, I could cue this Intuition if I noticed it in time, but I didn't. So I'm going to do a Missiles into Blast, Blast, Barrage here, since I have Intuition proc. So Blast, and then Blast, Barrage here, because Intuition. Normally, though, you would just cast a Blast at 4. But in this case, since I have Intuition, that gets me to 5 anyways. The main thing about casting Arcane Blast at 4 always is that you just want to make sure you go into 5 with like a Missile up. That's the idea. Okay, so here I'm at 5, and Missiles is available. This should always be the case, unless you just get really unlucky. You're going to Missiles here at 5. And then after the Missiles, you're going to cast Blast, Blast, Barrage. So I want to pause it here just to point something out. So the secret sauce here with 5 is that if we have 5 and we use Missiles, we have 2 stacks of Nether Precision. So if we use one of those on an Arcane Blast, which is what we want to do, now we have the perfect setup, right? We have 1 Nether Precision, 1 Burden of Power. We're going to double dip on both of those without losing any value. That's why we do this, okay? That's why we're always blasting at 4 or like using our Intuition proc with our previous 2 blasts so that we can get to 5 in the same way, okay? So we're going to Missiles here and then Blast Barrage. So the Blast Barrage here, both of those basically benefit from the Burden of Power and the Nether Precision after we did the Missiles blasts right before that. And now we're at 2 Spellfire Spheres. So this is always going to be the case. If you blast into Barrage with Burden of Power, which is what you should be doing, you're always going to have 2 Spellfire Spheres here. So we can just rip the Missiles, right? We're below 4, so we can just use Missiles freely. So Missiles into Blast Blast. And then we're going to use, we're not going to use the Missiles here because we're at 4, right? So at 4, we're just going to do a Blast. And then here we're at 5, so we use the Missiles. And then we're going to blast into Blast Barrage, right? Same setup with 5 there and getting the perfect double dipping on it. Okay, so here we are entering our Arcane Soul. Arcane Surge is ending. Now, keep in mind, this Missiles proc I got just now happened from that blast I just did. So we're watching this in slow motion. I can pause it. So obviously I can see that, you know, I should be missiling here, but you can't really react as fast normally, right? So what you'd normally want to do here is if you had the Missiles, you would want to use the Missiles first and then Barrage. But obviously I wasn't able to react in time because this happened so fast. But the goal is basically if we are at 3 clear casts, we just want to send Missiles on its own. If we have Nether Precision up, then we want to use Barrage. Okay. And if we don't have Nether Precision up and we have clear cast, obviously we want to get the clear cast. And if we don't have anything, we can just Barrage. That's basically the idea. So you're just alternating basically between Barrages and Missiling. So here, you know, I wasn't able to react again in time for the Missiles. So I'm just going to send the Barrage. This will always give you 1, right? And then I can Missiles now. And then after that Missiles, I can Barrage, right? Because I have 2 Nether Precision. By the way, I'm ignoring the Burden and Power procs during this. So now I have 3 clear casts, so I need a clear cast, right? So I do 1 clear cast, and then I would Barrage, clear cast, Barrage, clear cast. Basically, you just alternate, because you want to end at 3. Okay, so I'm just going to let this one play out, but basically, yeah, we're just trying to exit here with 3 clear casts if we can. So there I exited with 3, and then I want to be using Shifting Power soon, but essentially I can use this Missiles here beforehand. Obviously, with Burden, you always queue Blast into Barrage. We have 3 clear casts, so we're going to spin the clear cast here, and then we need to make sure we press our Shifting Power. And Shifting Power is going to make Touch of the Magi come up really, really fast, right? So we don't want to like hold on and wait and just idle while this is happening. We're still just going to keep doing our normal rotation, but we're going to try to set it up so that we can have the Nether Precision here for the touch. And then it's even better if we have 5. So I'm actually setting this up. Look, I'm getting 5 Spellfire Spheres here. I'm going to Missile, and then I'm going to Barrage into the touch. I'm pointing this out because I want to show you something. So I'm going to Barrage here in the touch. This sets up the Burden of Power, like we talked about. So I'm now able to blast in the Barrage. And that blast right there is doing extra damage because it has Burden of Power. So basically, it's like, if you can set this up, sometimes it takes a bit of practice, I guess you could say. But like, it's not something to go too far out of your way for. Like, don't like ruin the rest of your rotation trying to set this up. Don't sit on cooldowns too long to set this up. You just want to like set it up naturally. And it's kind of hard to get a feel for it. But basically, it's like if you see Touch of the Magi coming up very soon, then having 5 is really nice for that. Or what you could do maybe is like get to 5 and then shifting power, maybe, and then have the missiles as like the padding until your touch is actually up, and then you can send the barrage into touch. But that's generally the idea. And then we're just back to the normal rotation, right? We're just casting, Blast, Barrage after missiles, unless we're at 4. At 4, we're just going to cast a Blast, right? And then we missiles at 5 into Blast, Barrage. Same deal as before. And you're just trying to kind of hold on for your dear life while this is going. I'm going to put it at normal speed, but basically you're going to have situations here where like your mana gets really low depending on your TA procs. But as you can see here, we're just kind of chucking along. We got a really lucky TA proc there. So that was nice. But yeah, basically just trying to hold on to our mana as much as we can. Your mana will get low. It's completely normal. You're going to end up in a situation where you like can't cast another blast. So like right here, you can see this is unfortunate. I'm at 5. If I cast this blast, I can't cast another. So I have to press a barrage after this, right? That's my only choice. And then if you have like 0 charges and you have Glorious Incandescence, you can just send barrage to get back to 4, or you can Arcane Orb if you're below 2. And that's fine too. But basically, you're just trying to get to your evocation again without being completely idle. So if you run out of mana completely, you can just throw out barrages. But really, it's not so much about not running out of mana. Running out of mana is just an RNG thing. You can get a certain amount of mastery that definitely helps with that, but it's not better than other stats. It's just better that you basically get all your damage out whenever you're in your cooldowns. And this is the conserve phase, so who cares? It's whatever, right? But whenever our evocation is back up, obviously we want to set up the same thing again. We're just basically looping here, right? So here I'm using my missiles to get the nether precision set up for the evocation. And then I'm going to use the evocation. And then, we're going to press our surge here. And then we're going to actually touch after a barrage. But yeah, basically here, it's not like the opener where we're doing like the touch without the barrage, right? Because we're going to have 4 arcane charges, or at least we should here. So yeah, we're going to do the evocation here and the surge, and then I'm going to barrage touch here. And then now I have 1 charge here of nether precision, 1 stack of it. So I can arcane blast to get to burden, and then I'll missile here into blast barrage, right? So this is just normal rotation again. And just to recap on that, before 4 stacks of Spellfire Spheres, you just use missiles if you have it, right? At 4, you just want to blast, okay? And then at 5, you want to use your missiles, which you should have at that point, into Blast Barrage. If you don't have a missile, then just blast, and then hopefully you'll have it there, and you can use it right before you use burden, so it'd be missiles into Blast Barrage. But yeah, basically just repeating the whole thing. This is the entire single target rotation. It's a lot to get down, so feel free to watch this part over if you need to. But that is the basics of the single target opener. So yeah, there's a lot of stuff going on here. The main thing is that you're paying attention to the Spellfire Spheres, because those Spellfire Spheres dictate how you play. Because at 4, you are just like you're not doing other stuff, you're just blasting, right? At 5, you're doing the sequence of missiles, blast, barrage, just like Spellslinger. And then before that, you can just kind of play it by ear. Use intuition procs after your blasts. Bonus points if you can do that, while also double dipping on nether precision, right? So doing the blast into the blast barrage. But obviously, if you have burden to power up, just don't do that. You never want to send your intuition into burden on its own, unless you're in like Arcane Soul or something like that, because rules don't apply there. So here's my breakdown from that test, and as you can see, my Arcane Blast damage is leading everything else, and obviously this will change in AoE, but that's the general idea. If you're doing single target, generally the stats are haste above all else. This is also true for AoE, but haste is just going to be your best stat. And then you kind of want like an equal distribution of like crit and mastery, and then you want verse behind it. I don't really have any verse because I'm using the cursed haste enchant, so I'm basically getting free stats on the beta, but obviously you won't be able to do this because you won't be able to dictate every single stat whenever you're actually playing your mage on live. But for trinkets, we just want like a nice little stat stick trinket, and we want to pair that with Spy Master's Web. I'm using the Sack Brood right now, but I could also use Unbound Changeling. This would probably be better, but obviously you have to go get this in dungeons, and I don't have the food buff, so you actually want this on the triple buff. I'm not going to level up food for Shadowlands to get that buff, so we're not going to bother with that. But the way you're going to use your trinket is you're going to hold on to your Spy Master's Web stacks, because they actually give you a lot of int, and then you're going to use this whenever you're in your Arcane Surge, the first one that happens in Execute. But obviously, if you're going to die, and you know you're going to die, then you need to use your trinket earlier on, because you're going to lose your stacks anyways, right? The goal here is just to hold on to the stacks until Execute, and then hopefully get more out of it. So we already talked about the stats for AoE, but obviously in AoE you want to spend more barrages, because you're going to be doing a lot more damage with casting barrage. So stuff like Sunfury Execution, very good. And then obviously having Orb Barrage is great in AoE. You'll get a lot of charges from this. High Voltage also is really, really good because we're going to be having a hard time keeping our 4 arcane charges in AoE. You won't have to worry about mana in AoE, which is nice, but you definitely need to pay more attention to your arcane charges, and just having more ways to get arcane charges is better. And then that's why I also take Charged Orb, because you probably notice, like in single target, I barely ever use Orb, except for if I'm like out of mana. But in AoE, obviously Orb is really, really good to use. But obviously make sure that you don't waste it as well. Okay, so when it comes to the AoE rotation, it's actually very similar to Spellslinger. Like you're still wanting to make sure you have Nether Precision up if you have 4 charges and Arcane Missiles is available so that you can get the extra damage on your Barrage. But really the name of the game is just casting as many Barrages as you possibly can. The main difference here between Spellslinger and Sunfury is that with Sunfury, we want to make sure that we're actually paying attention to our Burden of Power. And also we're not using Arcane Explosion generally. That's why we don't take Reverberate. Basically, the only case where you would use Arcane Explosion is if you have Burden of Power available and you have 0 charges and you have 0 orb, and you're just trying to do a Blast in the Barrage, but you don't want to do that with 0 charges. So you could get to 3, and then you could do the Blast in the Barrage, and then that would give you 4 and you double dip. But yeah, pre-evocating here, right, after I use my mirrors so I don't have aggro. After this evocate, I'm going to set my orb so I get 4 charges. I'm going to use a Missiles here. And then after this Missiles, we are all systems go. So we're going to go ahead and do an Arcane Surge here. And then after this Arcane Surge, we're going to cue the Barrage into Touch of the Magi before it hits. Notice how I'm targeting the highest health enemy. This is important. You need to make sure the target that you're looking at has enough health to take the damage. So I always try to find like the highest health target while I'm doing the missiles. So that's going to be this target here. So anyways, we do Surge into Barrage Touch, right? And then here we're going to do the Blast into Barrage like we would normally do. And that spins our Nether Precision twice, so we double dip on that. And now, whenever you are at any amount of Arcane Charges that isn't 4 in AoE, and you have missiles available, you're just going to send your missiles, okay? But in this case, I did actually get a proc there, so I don't have to worry about that. I'm going to use the missiles anyways, because I want to get Nether Precision. So either way, you know, if you get the Orb proc, if you don't get the Orb proc, if you don't have the Nether Precision, you're just going to be casting missiles. So that's pretty standard. And then obviously you want to use the Barrage afterwards. And if you don't get a proc, it's good to use your orb itself. So this is why we have the 2 charges of orb. This is like bad luck protection. So like if I end up in that situation and I don't get the orb barrage proc, that could be really bad if I don't have another orb to use, because I'd have to build back up to 4, right? So I use the orb here to get back to 4. And now I'm going to use an Arcane Barrage here to spend, right? And I have missiles, so I'm going to go ahead and send those missiles. And whenever you send the missiles, basically what we're going to try to do is have 4 charges and Barrage, right? So right here, I'm at 5 stacks of Spellfire Spheres. So we can go ahead and do a Blast here. That will get us to 4 Arcane Charges and also set for our Burden of Power. And now we have Burden of Power. And whenever we have Burden of Power, we want to use Blast into Barrage, right? And basically, if you have no Arcane Missiles available, you just want to go ahead and just send the Barrages on their own. That's going to be the case sometimes. But if you do have the missiles, then just send that. And you're always clipping the missiles, even in AoE. Okay, so I had an Aether Attunement proc there. Okay, so I wanted to rewind just a little bit because I want to show this. So whenever you have Aether Attunement up, this missiles is always going to give you 4 charges instantly. Okay, so if I press a missiles with Aether Attunement up, I'm still clipping it with the Barrage. But it's going to give me 4 charges right away. So we missiles, and then here, I'm going to have max charges, so I'm just going to use a Barrage here. But basically, that's the idea. And you're just trying to avoid using Arcane Explosion whenever possible. And then now my Arcane Surge is about to end, so I'm just going to go ahead and scoot forward here. Okay, so right here, the Arcane Soul is up, right? And all the mobs are in execute, so this is perfect, right? So since I have Nether Precision, I'm going to go ahead and just rip the Barrages here. So yeah, basically whenever you're in Arcane Soul for AoE, you just want to be sending as many Barrages with Nether Precision as possible. And you could enter this with 0 charges, and then you just Barrage, and now you're at 4, so that's fine. So pretty much always start off your Arcane Soul with just like a Barrage, and then you want to get the Nether Precision buff, and you just want to send Barrages. So typically it's just like Barrage Missiles, Barrage Missiles, Barrage Missiles. But yeah, that's the general idea, but these mobs are going to die before I can even really react to like swapping the targets. But yeah, that's the general idea. The rotation is basically the same as Spellslinger, except for you're queuing the Blast into Barrage whenever you have Burden of Power. You're also casting Blast instead of casting Arcane Explosion if you have 0 charges, so that you can get back up. But obviously the higher priority there would be to like use an orb, right? We want to use our orbs so that we can get those charges if we're below 2. And yeah, you can actually play this from range because you don't need to press Arcane Explosion, although you could if you have Burden of Power up, and you would use that to get to 3 Arcane Charges so you could do a Blast Barrage. But yeah, Arcane AoE, very, very similar to, I had to invest there because I pulled aggro. Very similar to Spellslinger, right? Just anytime you have the burden of power, we want to cast a blast into Barrage. That's the main thing. There are a couple other small things I want to mention. So like if you have Glorious Incandescence, you just want to send that to get your 4 charges back. And there are going to be situations where you have like a surplus of missiles. And if you have, more missiles, and you still aren't at like 4 arcane charges, you just want to send missiles. So like sometimes you'll actually be sending multiple missiles in a row as Sunfury just to try and get to your 4 arcane charges. Like you'll use missiles more of like a generator as opposed to like just being for another precision. But yeah, it's actually like really fun once you get the hang of it. Obviously, there's a lot going on with this build, but I think overall, like Sunfury just kind of owns in dungeons once you get your mind wrapped around it. So it definitely seems like it's worth looking into. So definitely check this one out. And I highly recommend that you go practice on the target dummies too. All right, and that is going to be it for today's version of Sunfury Arcane. Obviously, things could change, but we're at kind of the end of the beta cycle, so I doubt we'll have like too many big changes. But, putting together stuff like this takes a lot of time, so if you made it to the end of the video, I'd really appreciate it if you just go ahead and click like on this video and subscribe to the channel and ring that notification bell. That way you'll be notified whenever my new videos come out. It is very much appreciated, and that way you can get the information before everyone else. But yeah, thank you all for watching, and we'll see you in the next one.